to welcome you all, this wonderful SFX audience, to Just a Minute. We have for you tonight, in the tradition of the 50-year-old BBC Radio 4 comedy quiz show, 4 titans of science fiction and fantasy literature who will be in a death match. 4 authors come in, 4 authors leave in a different order. This game is now played at conventions across the world. It's become a thing science fiction and fantasy audiences do. So, for a start, and I'll explain a little as we go, you're probably aware of Just a Minute, but I'll give you a few explanations. I'd like you to welcome our Dolly scorer, the editor of SFX, Mr. Dave Bradley. Dave will be making sure that our contestants don't go on for over a minute. So it'll be like your general SFX interview, really. He'll also be making sure that the points are kept accurately. So, let's welcome our contestants. From the top, ladies and gentlemen, give a warm welcome to Gritty Joe Abercrombie. Do I have to say his name? China Syndrome Mieville. Sarah, a matter of blood, Pinborough. And last but not least, Toby, Werewolf versus Vampires Whithouse.
Is that working? Huh. We who are about to die, salute you.
Now, the aim of Just a Minute is to talk in hopefully a witty fashion for 1 minute on a subject I'll give them, without hesitation, deviation, or repetition. That is, they're not allowed to go they're not allowed to leave little gaps and pauses, they're not allowed to deviate from the subject, and that includes saying, I don't know anything about this subject, that's deviation. And repetition, they're only allowed to repeat the smallest words, words like a, the, and, things like that. There's no
Oh, shit. No, I meant that. Is that okay?
Repetition.
It's going to be one of those.
You can do it. If shit's in the title, you can do it.
I love the fact, Pinborough, that was your first word on the panel. Has that ever happened before?
It really wasn't my first word in my head.
Okay, so we'll go from this end.
No, you promised me the other end.
I won't be the one deciding whether or not the other players have infringed. These people will be doing it to each other.
It's been a dream of mine for some time to sit alongside China in this capacity.
No, really, save me.
And
that's where repetition comes in handy. Oh yeah, I went there.
Let's try all your lights. Try your lights. Excellent. Okay, I feel like a school headmaster. Try your lights, boys, try your lights. So, I'll be asking Joe, could you begin an attempt to speak for 1 minute without hesitation, deviation, or repetition on the subject of urban fantasy? Urban fantasy.
Urban fantasy is one of those recently developed genres that I cannot help but feel masquerades as the genuine article, because when I think of fantasy fiction, I imagine proudly swords, magic bladed weapons, dragons, unicorns, knights riding towards a proud future, leading a charge.
China?
Abercrombie's doing far too well at this. So, deviation from the natural order of things.
I don't think I can allow that. Point to Joe for an incorrect challenge. And Joe continues the subject with 36 seconds to go on listing things in urban fantasy from now.
Leading a charge against the forces of darkness. However, in urban fantasy, we, the readers, are invited to attend to
China?
That was hesitation.
It certainly was. There was an there. So China gets a point for a correct interruption.
Fix
And
up.
China, you have 23 seconds remaining on the subject of urban fantasy, starting now.
Catargo delenda est. These were
Joe?
deeply irritating. Yeah, I have to cop to that, to be fair.
Yeah, but incredibly, we don't have deeply irritating as a category in just a minute, so that gives China a point for an incorrect challenge, and China now has 19 seconds on the subject of urban fantasy, starting now.
As Cato the Elder said during the Punic Wars, what is the point of this anecdote I hear everyone in this fantastic hall asking, and I shall tell you the answer to that question, which I feel awash over me in waves of interrogation. And the answer is... Oh, are you playing? Sorry. Because I see 4 buzzers, not 500. So...
Okay. So, I heard it, the audience heard it, but you guys waited until the minute had actually stopped before mentioning.
I was just thinking about how deeply irritating it was.
So, China gets a point for finishing the minute, and we now have you starting a new subject, China. I'd like you to talk about those things we find in hard SF, in space opera, the big dumb object. Could you talk about the big dumb object for a minute, starting now?
Also sprach Zarathustra. These words are, of course, as everybody knows, Nietzsche's. But the relevance here is for the block upon the moon in the film too.
Sarah?
I just don't understand anything he's saying.
I'm not sure I do either, but that's still not within the rules, so point to China. You're going to win through this, aren't you? It's a new way.
I'm going to win through sheer juggernaut of irritation.
Okay. You have another 47 seconds on the subject of big dumb objects, starting now.
2001, A Space Odyssey. Upon the moon appears an extraordinary rectangle of some sort of magical obsidian. This is, in some ways, the paradigm, the zenith of the big dumb object, the telos, if you will, of the trope, and I will. The apotheosis of this notion within the fiction and the field which we in this room love so well, and with such fervour and grandeur and rigour and vigour and passion. But that's clearly deviation.
Yes, I think it was deviation. He went, yes.
I've lost the room, haven't I?
Good Lord, somebody scored a point through conventional means. Point to Joe Abercrombie, who has 15 seconds on the subject of big dumb objects, starting now.
When I think of a big dumb object, I think not of China Bayville, but of a space station, or perhaps no small moon. When that phrase is used, what is brought to my mind is that huge and fully...
Stop! And... Joe gets a point for speaking as the whistle went, and we move on to Sarah's turn, God help us, to start the minute.
Oh, crap.
Sarah,
Can you remember that I know nothing about fantasy, science fiction, anything therein? Can we do shoes? In fact, I don't know much about shoes. We can't talk about that. It's a family show. Something nice and fluffy. A cat. Can I talk about cats? Shall I shut up and let you speak? I've got a minute.
Deviation.
Sarah, I'd like you to talk for a minute on the subject of, let's say, giants. Giants.
Well, giants are quite important to me because, contrary to popular opinion, size is actually quite a big thing to a lady. Therefore, although they exist in fiction, I do believe they are always a metaphor, or in fact a euphemism, for a boy part at any point in time when I read about them. This makes much fantasy literature far more, oh crap, I was going to say interesting.
Hesitation, point to China for a correct interruption, and I was wondering where that was going, honestly. 33 seconds on the subject of giants, starting now.
Giants are distinguished by their bizarre choice of habitat, such as at the top of an enormous stalk of vegetation growing through questionable means by some beams. Rhyming seems to have done me quite well in this so far. I thought I would go for another. Jack, the giant killer, gives us the notion that for any person with that name should be avoided if one is indeed a giant. The person who puts that...
Oh, I saw Toby just first. Toby.
Oh God, I've accidentally got myself in the game now. Person, repetition of person.
Repetition of person indeed. Point to Toby for a correct challenge. And you have 3 seconds on the subject.
Alright, just on principle, you buzz on second 1, I'm buzzing on second 2 and 3. Go.
3 seconds starting now.
Giants are very well.
Oh, sure.
He works in television. Is that allowed?
We thought we'd get some minorities on it. Okay, so Joe, you give Toby a point for an incorrect challenge. And Toby now has 2 seconds on the subject of giants, starting now.
In writers such as the big...
Did he get it? No, he didn't. China, you actually did buzz there.
I did. Well, we had an arrangement, second 1, second 2. And so I want a point for solidarity. I wasn't really listening. Did he hesitate?
Toby gets another point for an incorrect challenge. And has 1 second on the subject of giants, starting now.
Fables such as the Brothers Grimm.
I'm afraid that it actually clicked to 0 before you hit.
Some men are so quick.
Toby gets a point for speaking as the whistle went. And it's now back to Joe's. Oh no, sorry, no. Oh no, of course, sorry. Pardon me. Television writer must treat him gently.
I want that fiver back.
Toby, you get to start. I'd like you to talk about vampires versus werewolves. Vampires versus werewolves, starting now.
Vampires versus werewolves is a tale as old as time. As from the moment that there has been supernatural creatures, then there has been an antipathy and a conflict between vampires and werewolves. Who has the upper hand, who is the most powerful...
China?
I may have been a little bit forward about coming forward here, but I think there was a deviation from grammar. I think my esteemed colleague agreed a plural subject with a singular verb has. Which, you're the only writer on this panel who cares about grammar.
You're right, that's just annoying. It wasn't enough of a deviation from the English language, I think, to allow it. Toby gets a point for an incorrect challenge.
You just want work in
You can't interrupt me.
No, I can't. I'm just wondering where our booze was that we ordered before we got on the stage.
Yeah, good question. There is a deviation from Jack Daniels.
This being SFX, I'll have some along, I'm sure. Toby, you have 45 seconds on the subject of vampires versus werewolves, starting now.
Vampires and werewolves have incredibly different skill sets. One might argue that werewolves are, in a way, more powerful at a specific time of the month when they are turned into huge, raging, ravenous creatures, whereas vampires are much more of a kind of flat line in terms of power, though obviously during daylight they are significant.
What? Oh, Sarah?
Repetition of power.
Oh, yes, indeed.
Oh, you've changed.
and you have 24 seconds on the subject of vampires versus werewolves, starting now.
Vampires versus werewolves is a subject that interests me not at all, because I am not a great fan of either vampires or werewolves, because I don't believe that either really exist. Although some men that I have lived with have said that I have turned into a complete bitch for 3 days of a month and saved me.
There was some hesitation on the word bitch, which surprises me.
There was indeed. Joe gets a point for a correct challenge, and 5 seconds on the subject of vampires versus werewolves. You're still with that. 5 seconds starting now.
It's interesting that we should be approaching the topic of vampires versus werewolves, because just earlier...
China?
It's not that interesting. I mean, I always say straw poll. I'd say it's moderately interesting at best. So.
I'm beginning to see why Nicholas Parsons is like that. Yes, that was an incorrect challenge, therefore Joe gets a point for an incorrect challenge. I remember how this game works. And has 1 second remaining, starting now.
I was speaking of urban fantasy.
Stop! So Joe once again gets a point for speaking as the whistle went. Now, I'll be giving the panel each a title to talk on in this round from science fiction and fantasy. So I'd like Joe to begin with, could you talk for a minute without hesitation, deviation or repetition on Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? Starting now.
Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep was a novella, if I correctly remember the word limit applied by the Hugo Award Association, published by the writer Philip K. Dick. It was later adapted as the famous science fictional blockbuster Blade Runner, starring Harrison Ford, Rutger Hauer in one of his first roles. It's interesting, in fact, because that particular white-haired actor never really amounted to as much as people might have hoped that he would.
China.
See, I even gave him more time, and it wasn't very interesting. I mean, if you're going to make these grandiose claims about interestingness, you've got to back it up. So I'm going to say deviation from interest.
Yeah, no. Points to Joe for an incorrect challenge. You can make up your own rules, we don't have to follow them. Joe has...
It's called rigor, my friend, it's called rigor.
26 seconds on
You're the only writer who cares about rigor on this panel.
26 seconds on the subject of Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, starting now.
I have often wondered whether androids actually do dream of electric sheep. It is without doubt an esoteric title, and one like a souffle in a cupboard. It all came apart so fast, it was going so well.
Sarah got in there, and you get...
Just let me have like 2 seconds left to repeat the title of the subject.
You have 15 seconds, which is too long, I think, to repeat this title. 15 seconds starting now.
Do androids dream of electric sheep? Well, actually they do. I had a deep heart-to-heart with one quite recently who said yes, that was the case, and on my 15 seconds done yet, I'm staring into a void. They've talked about this film as much as they can. Rutger Hauer should have done better.
Stop! Oh. Do you think that he hit his buzzer before? Well, they seem conflicted.
There was a yes, it was a definite yes. I heard a yes. Just try it again, yes or no? That's a yes. That's definitely yes.
It's not panto, Abercrombie.
It's still on.
Yes, it is. Still on. Okay. I think he didn't get in time there, so I'll point to Sarah for speaking as the whistle went.
It's a fix.
Because that was a fix. It was a mercy.
Like the David Gemmell Legend Awards, it's fixed.
It was a mercy killing.
It was a mercy killing.
That was like the King's speech. It was God. Anyway, China. What's over there?
No, sorry,
Hoping for the drinks.
focus. I'm in my Zen place.
China, I'd like you to speak for 1 minute without hesitation, deviation or repetition on the subject of Beyond Lies the Wub. Beyond Lies the Wub. It's a Philip K. Dick novel.
Thank you.
They were going.
I knew.
Sorry. I thought my geek credentials were being, like, sort of questioned. I was very defensive.
Starting now.
Clearly, in this room, we are on a Dick theme from more than one direction, as it happens. But Beyond Lies the Wub is the title given to a relatively recently, when you look out at time from the enormous stretch of years as I do, collection.
Joe.
Hypocrisy. You previously accused me of being uninteresting.
Yeah, I accept that.
If we gave points for hypocrisy, we'd never stop. I think that's an incorrect challenge under the rules, so Charlie gets a point, and 44 seconds of wobbness remain, starting now.
A collection of short stories, indeed the entirety of the oeuvre of Philip K. Dick in, as I recall, 5 volumes, the first of which was given the title of one of the stories therein, Beyond Lies the Wub. I don't actually know that I have read this particular specimen, which I know, shocking, right? Seriously. But we all have a kunai, and I ask you, my brethren and sistren, my tribe, my companions, my comrades in nerdery, can any of us here look out and say, I have read every single classic in this field? Can any...
Joe.
Well, that's a repetition of red.
Indeed it was.
I was having a kind of a bit of a moment.
And actually, I thought deviation as well for a long time.
Not expect I'm talking to him, though.
So, that's a correct challenge, so a point to Joe, and 5 seconds remain on the subject of Beyond Lies the Wub, starting now.
Beyond Lies the Wub, I must confess, is a book that I have not read, but my brethren...
Stop! Joe once more gets a point for speaking as the whistle went. Sarah, I'd like you to talk for 1 minute without hesitation, deviation or repetition on the subject of Flow My Tears, the Policeman Said. Flow My Tears, the Policeman Said, which is a Philip K. Dick novel. Flow My Tears, the Policeman Said, start now. Sarah. I saw Toby first. Actually, I had a hand over my eyes.
Tears, Paul Cornell said to me as my tears were... What? How? What?
So
Am I looking at them? What?
Toby's successfully interrupted now. We're there now.
Oh, dear God, I was just starting.
Toby, you get a point for a correct challenge, and 58 seconds on the subject of Flow My Tears, the Policeman Said. Starting now.
Flow my tears, the policeman said. Who here can say they haven't read that book? Clearly,
Sarah,
Sorry, that was just accidental.
what's the nature of your challenge? Okay, so that's a point to Toby for an incorrect challenge.
I don't make the rules.
They are quite good fiddle value, I have to say. They are good.
Is it more alcohol?
Toby, not enough alcohol. That's not the problem.
Toby, you have 51 seconds on the subject of Flow My Tears, the Policeman Said, starting now.
Who here can say that... No. Repetition. Who's right? Pick the bones out of that one, Cornell.
His light definitely went on first.
You can't challenge yourself, therefore he's still going. Joe.
Insufferable. Entirely insufferable behaviour.
Okay, Joe, that's an incorrect challenge, so Toby gets another point, and he's still going. This is still Toby's minute, he is still going. Time is ticking away.
Philip K. Dick is obviously an incredibly well-known and prolific writer of science fiction, fantasy, genre stuff.
I saw Joe first.
Hesitation.
Yes, it was.
Oh, thank you.
41 seconds, Joe. Flow My Tears, starting now.
Flow My Tears, the policeman said, appears to be proof that Paul Cornell is obsessed by the works of Philip K. Dick. I could not honestly tell you a single thing about this book, except I would expect it features some kind of hallucinogenic subplot. The author was rather prone to those kind of distractions, those rambling asides, featuring Class A drugs, if you will. I do believe that he was rather partial to a tipple.
Sarah, just first.
Acid isn't a Class A drug.
Actually, that's a successful challenge because he
I
deviated
know.
from the truth. So,
I think acid is a Class A drug.
No, it's not.
I believe it is.
I believe it is
That
not.
doesn't make that work.
If only there was some interconnected network of computers with the answer to everything.
That I said that.
I didn't think I'd be asking this today. Does anybody know if acid is a Class A drug? It's a Class B, though,
It's a
sir.
Class B drug.
It can be A or B.
Well,
She was talking about B. So
I was talking about the cheap version they sell around my way.
okay, Sarah gets a point for a correct challenge,
Do
and
I get my topic back now that I'm paying attention?
you get 12 seconds on the subject of Blow My Tears. I can't believe we're still in this, starting now.
Blow My Tears, the policeman said, is clearly something I have not read. However, when I was caught taking Class B acid, the policeman did say, you're going to cry when your parents hear about this. And I said, oh, please, officer, no, don't arrest me.
Stop! Point to Sarah for speaking as the whistle went. You are sort of deviation blind, aren't you?
I'm just a deviant.
Toby, I'm getting fed up with my dick titles, so I think for you, which
I
basically
don't think this is quite the arena to be discussing that.
which basically means I can't think of a fourth. So,
Do you want me to suggest one?
so I'm going to give you A Fall of Moondust, which is by Arthur C. Clarke. A Fall of Moondust, 1 minute starting now.
The terrible thing about situations like this, when you're being given a book title to discuss, particularly in an environment of science fiction, fantasy writers and fans, is that it really exposes your ignorance. And here we are, having to all admit that we haven't read the specific book, and inherently it makes you feel guilty, and as if you actually should have read these particular titles and merch.
Oh, China, yeah.
Thank you.
Someone needed to save you guys.
Whatever, yes, thank you.
I was going to go for repetition. Did he repeat read? Red.
Yes, he did repeat red.
At the very least, yeah.
Okay, so China, you have 35 seconds on A Fall of Moondust. And of course, you don't have to talk about the specific thing itself. You could talk about moondust falling, starting now.
Moondust is one of those words compounded from two words as
Sarah.
I'm off my game.
Correct challenge to Sarah, and she has...
I'm ashamed.
Well, you were going to say hesitation, I
I
assume.
might have been, yeah.
Were you going
I
to...
don't like it when men just take the words out of my mouth. Do you know what I mean, ladies?
Well, it saves time. Split the room.
Nicholas Parsons doesn't get accused of casual sexism easy. Well, actually, you should. But anyway, Sarah, you get 26 seconds on the subject of A Fall of Moondust, starting now.
The Fall of Moondust. This intrigues me slightly because given the lack of gravity on the surface of that said object in space above the Earth, it makes me wonder how it can fall if there is no gravitational pull to drag it back to the rock when in fact it should float away into the rest of that empty void, a bit like this.
Joe.
I've heard that about 15 times, and that
Yes, okay.
definitely repetition of that.
Actually,
Total
Gallantry
cock.
apparently is.
no. That is one of our little words. Forgive me, I got that call wrong. So Sarah gets
Remember, Joe, size matters.
Sarah gets a point for an incorrect challenge.
What can you do about it, though? That's the problem. What can you do?
5 seconds on the subject of A Fall of Moondust, starting now.
The Fall of Moondust. is another thing that really interests me massively.
Okay, so after 2 rounds, Dave, can you tell us what the scores are?
Absolutely. Well, bringing up the rear, China Miable has 6 points.
China has 6.
Then we have a tie between Sarah and Toby, who both have 8.
Sarah and Toby both have 8.
And Joe is in the lead with 10.
And Joe is in the lead with 10. But there's
And
still,
so gracious with it as well.
but there's still,
I am the very god of humility.
there's still everything to play for, including my sanity. Joe, I'd like you to start on the subject of... Oh, well, wait. On the subject of... My favourite doctor. My favourite doctor. Starting now.
My favourite doctor is a phrase that within these environs...
China.
I was first.
She was.
Oh, sorry, yes, sorry, pardon me. No, I had an angle where his was in front of me.
Don't
whatever
excuses,
sexist.
whatever.
I'm really sorry about that, Sarah. I hate when men are sexist, Sarah.
There was some slight hesitation there.
Do you think there was some slight... Oh, you're just on her side now.
These are my
Don't hate me because I'm the god of humility. I mean, come on.
Okay, I think we'll go with that. Sarah, you get a point for not being in the lead when Joe is. And you have 54 seconds on the subject of my
Where's my
favourite
drink?
doctor.
Where's my drink?
And I'm kind of dreading this now. I'm on the subject of my favourite doctor, 54 seconds starting now.
My favourite doctor was a gynecologist I had back in 1995 when I was still a relatively young woman and in good shape down there. He was a particularly handsome man and, to be fair, quite good with his hands. It's quite hard to flirt with a man who isn't looking at you in the eye, which normally you prefer as a woman because it is...
China.
I just wanted to agree that none of us were going to buzz in. Okay?
Is one hand on the buzzer enough?
Sarah, you get a point for an incorrect interruption and continue on the subject.
Oh dear God, this is going to go places only that gynecologist should.
For the next 30 seconds starting now.
So, my favourite doctor is still, to be fair, that gynecologist, as much as I...
China?
Repetition of gynecologist.
Oh, repetition of gynecologist, okay.
He was hot though.
Point to China, and you have 25 seconds on the subject of my favourite gynecologist, my favourite...
I've never seen you go that red.
It's almost worth it. 25 seconds on the subject of my favourite doctor starting now.
This is a true story. The last time I went to the doctor, she was a tremendously attractive young person, and I was going in to check my blood pressure, and
Joe?
was that a was? Actually, I was just having a private moment. She was a very attractive young person.
Yeah, that's a point to Joe for a correct answer, thing, and Joe has 14 seconds on the subject of my favourite doctor starting now.
I was very rudely interrupted earlier by Sarah Pinborough when I was expounding to you all that within the...
Sarah?
He's just boring me.
Point to Joe for an incorrect interruption, and 5 seconds, my favourite doctor starting now.
That the phrase, my favourite doctor, would typically be thought of as applying to a famous television series.
Stop!
This is hard work. You don't know. You don't know how hard we work for you.
I think it's hard work for them too. Joe, you get a point for speaking as the whistle went, and it's China's turn to start. China, I'd like you to talk for a minute about mutations. Mutations, starting now.
I was going to have my blood pressure checked, and I sat down opposite the most extraordinarily attractive young person who said to me, "Your blood pressure appears to be rather..."
Toby?
Repetition of blood pressure.
I was banking on it being so fascinating you'd let that go, but...
Point to Toby. And Toby has 49 seconds on the subject of mutations, starting now.
Obviously, mutations have formed the basis and the genesis of many a science fiction and fantasy story, as it can imbue the subject with extraordinary powers or an extraordinary...
China.
Repetition extraordinary.
Repetition of extraordinary.
I know we make it look easy, but believe me.
And that's a point to China, and China has 37 seconds on the subject of mutations, starting now.
Every person in this room is the end result of a long chain of fabulous and wonderful mutations going back over history, aeons, many decades, and...
Sarah?
There was a slight hesitation there.
I think there
I
was.
thought of it as rhythm, but...
Ain't no rap contest, brother.
So, there goes the sisterhood then, eh? Last time I stick up for you, Pinborough.
Yeah, Pinborough. Sexist.
You have 25 seconds, starting now.
Mutations are quite an interesting subject, used often in fantasy and especially horror fiction over many repetitions of many.
China got there first.
Oh, it's like payback, isn't it?
Yes,
Okay. China, you have 16 seconds, starting now.
Darwin could be considered the patron saint of mutations. Did anyone else feel a weird kind of time warp there? Everything was... I was doing really well, but then time did this thing. It was very...
It's reflux.
That was almost simultaneous, but I think Toby, just. Okay, Toby, you have 9 seconds. Mutations starting now.
I think perhaps the most popular and famous example of mutations would be the Marvel comic series The X-Men, with the mutants as led by Professor X.
China?
I think Gojira would have something to say about that, is all I'm saying. Just wanted to put that out there.
Well, you just had time to give him a point from an incorrect challenge as the whistle
I'm
went.
saying it's deviation from the truth myself, but we could even put it to a straw poll.
Oh, yeah.
We could have Team Gojira, Team X-Men, and then we would know whether I or Toby won. But if you don't want to do that, sexist, that's up to you.
Are you calling me sexist or sexiest?
Yes, I am. Isn't ambiguity a lovely thing?
What happened there was that Toby had an incorrect challenge given to him because we can't decide on subjects that are a matter of opinion whether or not they're a deviation from the truth. That is to say, we are not here to settle the question of who's more popular, Gojira or the X-Men.
I mean, that's a really school teachery voice. You should think about it. You know, if it doesn't work out for you with the writing and stuff.
I just want to put it out there that we can't decide between matters of opinion is extraordinarily kind of defeatist thinking. Of course we can. We're geeks, that's what we do. Buffy season 6, Buffy season 7. Yeah. Bring it. Anyway, sorry, yeah.
Anyway, it's the X-Men. So, Toby gets a point for an incorrect challenge and a point for speaking as the whistle went. Thankfully, there are only 2 more subjects left. Oh, that's nice. Okay.
You want it to be one.
Pay attention this time, it's my turn, isn't it? I'm not looking in the corner for the fabled drinks that were supposed to arrive in 15 minutes.
Sarah, I'd like you to talk about Little Red Riding Hood. Little Red Riding Hood. For a minute, starting
Well, it's lucky you didn't
now.
give her one that she could talk about sex with, isn't it? Thank God, that'll go straight to the nursery.
All right, starting now.
Little Red Riding Hood is one of those fairy tales we are all brought up with. Now, I can't personally remember whether it is the one where there was some bears or whether it's the one where there was a wolf. Either way, I think they were...
Joe.
Surely whether it's the one is repetition.
Whether it's the one.
Yeah. Twice you said whether it's, you can remember whether it's the one.
Indeed, two weathers, in effect, is what you're saying.
Two weathers.
Yes, point to Joe for a correct challenge.
Some people pay far too much attention when I'm speaking.
And
Now
Joe
watch me
has
crash and burn.
45 seconds on the subject of Little Red Riding Hood starting now.
Little Red Riding Hood is one of those fairy tales that we are all
Sarah.
You're talking filth. Or was that just how I heard it?
Point to Joe for an incorrect challenge.
Well, I don't know how you're going to define this, but he went, which I think.
Yes, but it's too late
That
because
was
you already
the filthy
interrupted
bit.
and stopped the minute.
And that was just a rhetorical thing that I was doing.
Yeah, like Cato the Elder.
Joe, an incredible survival there, frankly, but there we are. 39 seconds on your part starting now.
Little Red Riding Hood is a tale that's been recently filmed, as I understand it. Charlize Theron plays a role within the film, but that...
China, you buzzed, I'm afraid you can't take it back.
I can. Sarah was before me. No, I was wrong.
Okay, point to Joe for an incorrect challenge, film and filmed. Joe has 29 seconds, starting from now.
A woodcutter plays an important part within the fairy tale. I do believe he is a large, well-muscled gentleman, probably with a hairy chest, a hirsute fellow, if you will. He later kills a wolf, and perhaps there is a strange juxtaposition between the lupine character and that of the man who is responsible for sawing wood within this story. But in any case, he is...
China.
I need a hyphen clarification.
Oh dear.
No, it's a point of information. Woodcutter, sawing wood. I don't know.
I think woodcutter's one word.
All right. Okay.
So,
I just wanted to be sure.
So that's an incorrect challenge.
Well
Joe
done,
gets a
Joe.
point,
Nicely done, yeah.
and you have 2 more seconds on the subject.
Can he tell us more about the woodcutter and his finely earned puzzle?
Both hands on the buzzer, Pimper.
In that
Both
2
hands.
seconds.
Both hands.
Sarah, put your hand back on your buzzer.
And when we say buzzer...
Is that a euphemism?
It's just a
Listen,
torrent
she
of
can find
filth.
Joe has 2 seconds remaining, starting now.
The grandmother is a character who is always very much...
China.
Repetition of character.
Yes, indeed, a repetition of character.
I'm like a last-minute ninja.
China gets a point for a correct challenge and 1 second, starting now.
So Philip K. Dick goes to a gynecologist.
And China gets a point for speaking as the whistle went. Or deviating as the whistle went, really. Okay, our last subject. Toby, I'd like you to tell us about gritty realism. Gritty realism. For a minute, starting now.
Many people might say that gritty realism has no place in science fiction or fantasy. However, I would disagree. I would think that it...
China.
Some hesitation.
Yeah, hesitation. Point to China for a correct challenge, and 52 seconds, starting now.
What interests me is, in a certain sense, the inverse of the question. If fantasy and or science fiction are gritty and realistic, whither realism itself as a genre, as a movement...
Sarah?
There wasn't a question, was there? Who said the inverse of the question? There wasn't a question, there was just a subject.
It's kind of implicit, isn't it?
I don't think so. You can't talk about the inverse of the question if no one asks you a flipping question.